what the interesting thing was about 90s when I went to college, it was a time where, I went to college in 95, where half of academia still were communist, and half in academia were like free enterprise, Friedman, Hayek, so we had a lot of debates. And honestly, we had more freedom of debates there than here in our colleges right now. We created tyranny, all Marxism in our college campuses. We're not teaching our American kids to think, to be strong individual, to be able to have a debate. It's a tyranny of opinion and oppression. So when I came here, at first, I read about all these founding fathers. So I read it from, a young person. You read a lot of books, so you believe, a little idealistic maybe in some ways. But I do not want to give up these ideals, because if we lose our fundamentals, this is the only thing that unites us. We all have different heritages, backgrounds, races, religions. The things that holds us together as Americans is fundamentals in our Constitution and founding principles. If we lose it and don't teach it to our children and don't embrace and fight for them, we're going to be gone as a republic.
Born in Nozivka, Ukraine in the former USSR, Victoria Spartz might at first seem like an unlikely standard bearer for a new generation of American conservatives. But make no mistake, that's exactly what she's become. Representing Indiana's 5th District, Congresswoman Spartz has made a name for herself as one of the most outspoken voices on Capitol Hill. Lasering in on federal overreach on everything from data collection to suppression of free speech, her confrontations of officials on the House floor have had a propensity for virality. In a head-to-head with Attorney General Merrick Garland, she didn't mince words at all, comparing his Justice Department directly to the KGB. This aggressive style has resonated in her home state of Indiana. As a first-time candidate in 2020, Spartz won a race by just 5 points. Fast forward to 2022, and she expanded that victory margin to 22 points. Given her background growing up in the USSR, Representative Spartz offers a unique perspective on the perils of socialism and just how easy it is for a nation to fall victim to its devices. However, there should be no confusion. Congresswoman Spartz is as red-blooded as an American gets. Since coming to America in 2000, Congresswoman Spartz has seen the United States begin to lose its way from the promise that our founding fathers intended. But, never one to accept defeat, Victoria Spartz is determined to reverse that course. Okay, Congresswoman, thanks for coming in today. We really appreciate it. How was your trip in?
Listen, always nice to be in a great state of Texas. I always say Indiana is my favorite state. Texas is my favorite country.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in Texas would agree with you. But we're obviously really familiar with you here, especially after the State of the Union. You became a crowd favorite for sure, for some words that maybe we'll get into later. But if anybody is not familiar with you, could you just give a little bit of your background? Where did you grow up, and how did you end up becoming the Congresswoman for Indiana's 5th District? What's that?
Well, actually, I grew up, it's Ukraine now, but actually it was Soviet Union. So I grew up in a Soviet country, under socialism, communism. And I came here right after college, young, adventurous, idealistic, with ideas of freedom, and reading Alexis de Tocqueville, Friedman, and Hayek. And then come to Jesus moment, I'm like, OMG, our government is reminding me the governments I grew up under. And honestly, that makes me mad as an American. Truly, I got involved with politics. I do not like politics. I actually hate it. But it just makes me so mad, and I belong to that group of people that need to put money where mouth is, and unfortunately got me in trouble and became crazy enough to become a politician. So I started getting involved with grassroots. I was a Tea Party organizer, took down leadership of my party, replaced with different people, and it's always very hard, and a lot of people on the ground, you have to do it yourself. I'm like, are you crazy? Me running for office? And I'll be honest with you, I never thought about it, but the only reason I ever was elected because good people on the ground were willing to stand with me. My party was always after me. They don't like women who can walk and chew gum at the same time, but I think a lot of at stake, and I need to make my party better, or we're screwed as a country.
No, that's very interesting, and I think a perspective that you have that would be very unique growing up in the Soviet Union and then coming here. I would be curious to know, what was your perspective, like when you were growing up over there, behind the information kind of firewall, and since you came here, what was your perception of America before you came? And then how has that changed since you have been here for most of your life?
Well, honestly, I was just thinking, like my short life, I'm 45 years old. I thought, okay, I grew up in socialism and the tyranny. I mean, because socialist system is always you have political elites on top, and then everyone else equally poor. But people don't want to have the same outcomes. So to be able to have the same outcomes, you have to force people. We're all freedom-loving people. We don't want someone on top tell us what to do, no matter where we live, right? We just as individuals. So you have to have tyranny and oppression to be able to force people to comply. So that's what Soviet Union was. When Soviet Union fell apart, like every socialist system runs out of money, it's inevitable. Then it turns into mob rule. So like 90s were like a mob rule, craziest times. And you can see how hard to get freedoms back. In the Ukraine, been independent for over 30 years, still cannot do it, and going through a lot of bloodshed. But what the interesting thing was about 90s when I went to college, it was a time where, I went to college in 95, where half of academia still were communist, and half in academia were like free enterprise, Friedman, Hayek, so we had a lot of debates. And honestly, we had more freedom of debates there than here in our colleges right now. We created tyranny, all Marxism in our college campuses. We're not teaching our American kids to think, to be strong individual, to be able to have a debate. It's a tyranny of opinion and oppression. So when I came here, first, I read about all these founding fathers. So I read it from, a young person. You read a lot of books, so you believe, when, a little idealistic maybe in some ways. But I do not want to give up these ideals, because if we lose our fundamentals, this is the only thing that unites us. We all have different heritages, backgrounds, races, religions. The things that holds us together as Americans is fundamentals in our Constitution and founding principles. If we lose it and don't teach it to our children and don't embrace and fight for them, we're going to be gone as a republic. And many republics fell apart for that reason. We are not, immune to it. Every republic can fall if we are not keeping our principles true. And a lot of people, I realize, when I talk to young kids, they don't even know that we're a republic. They don't understand the difference between pure democracy, which leads generally to mob rule and tyranny, and actually constitutional republic, where rights of minority views are protected. That's all. Protection of rights. There is never going to be the same opportunities. We all listen. I came with one suitcase, barely could speak English. My opportunities were pretty tough.
Yeah.
But it's all about equal rights, equality of rights, and where we can pursue happiness. What we are now becoming socialists, where we want to tell people what they need to be and have a quality of outcome and put a tyrannical state on top of it and intimidation. It makes me so mad when I sit in this committee and thinking, whatever I could do to me for calling them KGB. I thought this why gosh, this is a thought as an American I should never have, but I do. And that is very dangerous, that we started being afraid of our own government. That's wrong.
Right, it was kind of designed to be the opposite, where the government had to be afraid of the people to a certain extent.
That's right.
So I guess being perpetually online with the kind of work that we do here, and I'm sure you have to have your ear to the ground also, I notice a lot of people are very black-pilled or doomsday, or they're like, well, America's, it's going in this direction, and what's the point? What's the point of trying anymore? Do you see a turnaround? Is this something that we can change the tide on?
Well, the good thing, that's why I go, I don't know how people can live in DC. I come in the latest flight to DC and leave in the first one I could. I need to go home and get my sanity back and talk to normal people. When I come home back to Indiana, I see people are still normal. Americans do not want to live under socialism and tyrannical government. I see that people are sick and tired. That's why we have so much, really violence and upset and and depression and really all these bad things, because people are just tired and don't know what to do. So we are not the government anymore that representing the people. So the good thing, I see that Americans do not want what government is right now forcing on them. So that is the good thing. The bad thing, government became so powerful, and now it's so difficult for a good person to be able to get the right information. It's good that we have, at least you have guys podcasts like that when you can just talk normal things and tell the truth. People are not that stupid. Politician thinks that everyone is stupid. No, people are not that stupid. They actually, most of them, you wouldn't pay them $10 an hour. Most people in DC are the stupidest people I've ever worked with in my life, and I work in all kinds of professions. My first job was $8 an hour. So this is accumulation of the worst of the country happening right now in Washington, D.C., and it's breeding the swamp creatures over there. And it's really not what the country is. Our fundamentals are still strong. You can see even in tough cases. You will see, it will be interesting to see what's going to happen with Chevron doctrine. We went so much overboard that even liberal justices might be voting with conservatives. It potentially could be down to zero opinion to say administrative state is getting too big. That's how bad it's getting, where you have liberals, some of them are saying too much. Or the same happened with FISA. We had liberals actually coming with conservatives saying that is too much, even for some of the honest liberals.
Right, and that's what I wanted to touch on next, because initially we were supposed to have you out here maybe a week ago or something, but I know there's a bunch of important votes that came to the floor, one of those being the FISA situation. And so I wanted to kind of talk to you about that. And so there was the amendment that was proposed, right? That, okay, we're gonna renew FISA, but we need to put an amendment in there that makes it so you have to go get a warrant if you're going to include an American citizen in the spy operation. Why then were so many Republicans comfortable passing the FISA bill without that amendment? In fact, 126 Republicans of your colleagues voted yes on the bill without the amendment.
Well, it's unfortunate because a lot of it is really, we have people, establishment of both parties, drinking the Kool-Aid, and is afraid to go against the machine, which is very powerful, and goes there just to get along and move along. And they're all like, oh my gosh, they always make you nervous. Oh, what's going to happen if we're going to have this? It's a national security issue. They intimidate a lot of my colleagues to believe, that something is going to happen, and they're afraid. Unfortunately, no one is looking deep inside and see what is really happening. What should really be intimidating and threatening, that you have now our own government is able to collect unconstitutionally data and intimidate Americans, and where they're supposed to protect rights. I think a lot of my colleagues forgot that the only reason people actually pay us money to go to DC to protect their rights to life, liberty, and property, nothing else, and stay the hell out of our way. That is the only reason we were created as the government. We're not there to provide convenience and all of this, no, to protect rights. And this is a pure infringement on constitutional rights. It's even more than that. We allow NSA to collect data on Americans without even anyone checking what are they collected. So they collected, we don't know what, and we know that they were illegally collecting data on Americans with all of the scandals that happened in 2016 and before.
Of course.
Yeah, and then they can search illegally without warrant that data. So they try to do these phishing exercises, and hopefully they find something in you. It's like KGB. And now they have more capacity as KGB. They can put you, like, if you bought a gun and Bible, you'll be on a domestic terrorist list. I think this is very dangerous, but unfortunately a lot of my colleagues forgot what they're doing, plus big money there, support bad votes. And if you are taking the vote for the right reason, you might be on your own, or big money will come after you, and a lot of people are truly afraid.
Yeah, and you just touched on this a little bit. I know before the bill went to the floor, Speaker Johnson came out and he said, I've gotten information behind closed doors, and if you saw the sort of things that I saw, you would understand why we have to pass this. And I have a tweet here or a quote from Representative Crenshaw, who said that he's never been worried like he was worried now over the FISA passage. Is there things that we as a public aren't privy to that would change? Why did they go behind closed doors, come out and say, well, now I'm shocked, we have to pass this?
Well, listen, I've been in a lot of these briefings. Actually, you find out more from media. You go to briefings and you cannot talk about things that you read in the media, okay? So there is nothing there that they just saying you're so amazing. But it's all intimidation techniques. Our agency has been very effective to convince a lot of my colleagues that, oh my gosh, if we don't do this and if we don't do this, some bad thing's going to happen. But I don't think it's unreasonable. We do these things all the time. It's not unreasonable. If you deal with Americans, you can get quick warrant. There are actually exemptions in that warrant we did. If you have some urgent national security issue, you can do it without it, but it should be justified. You couldn't just have over 1 million queries incidentally done on Americans, millions. Then they say, well, we're better now. It's only like over 300,000. We did much better. I make you feel much better than rights of only 300,000 Americans were violated versus millions. You know? So you would feel your government is not as bad. You know, I mean, this is ridiculous. And unfortunately, people are not looking seriously. What is our job there? And my colleagues forget, we're not educated. My legislators, what is our job? Our job is to protect rights, not to serve deep state, not to serve agencies. We actually a separate branch of government. We the only check and balance that we the people have an ability to influence the other branch, and we made it so powerful. No matter who is in charge, it became too powerful, executive branch.
Right, which is what I wanted to ask you, and I think a lot of people expect if President Trump is elected for a second time, that he could just go in and fix this. But he was there for 4 years already. Is the, quote unquote deep state, which is really just this overblown bureaucracy that we all know exists with the NSA, the FBI, whatever intelligence agency you want to pick out, is it something that can be reformed with the change of elected leadership, or is it just so ingrained into the operations that there's not much to do about it? Like,
it can, and I think, but you just have to take, do like special operations. Okay, it cannot be done in a normal way because it's became such a machine is so big. So you have to think outside of the box, and it can be done. You can start reorganizing agencies, moving out them from DC, and a lot of this. Bureaucrats probably will not go back like somewhere like in South Dakota or something. Yeah. They'll have so you start, force people to go into retirement, start to bring in more efficiency to these agencies, put some little, accountability on them and start metrics, and a lot of them quit because they used to do nothing, So you actually need to do it, but you cannot fix it if you don't go deeper into this agency. There are so many positions being ingrained. And what Obama was very clever. He made a lot of his political appointment take positions where they became employees in a lot of like management level in all of these agencies. So they are political appointments that you cannot get rid of them when politicians change. So generally a lot of these agencies are like pretty much infiltrated by people with agenda. But these people love life in DC and love all of these perks. If you would get them to work and shuffle things around, I think a lot of them would quit. And I think you can do that, but you have to actually pick few that are most important, because the swamp is so big that you cannot do all everything all the time. But pick like three, I always say, pick 3 hills to die on and take them. Pick few of the major ones and start actually reforming them, truly reforming. And that's what Trump needs to do. Otherwise, we're doing things, he did a lot of great things through executive orders. He left what he did, Biden rescinded all these orders. And then have allies in Congress that can actually put some things into law that is harder to change. And I think Supreme Court will soon force us to do our work. And I think that might be a good alignment where actually Supreme Court is going to say us, guys, get to work. Congress, and maybe these people will get so overwhelmed that we'll have to do so many bills now and regulation, they will like wake up and say, wow, maybe we have too many.
Yeah. Once they start having to do work, yes. It's like, well, maybe I don't want to do this much work. Okay, another area where Republicans have been taking a lot of heat is the aid bill that just passed also. Yeah. And so being that you have a background that comes from the former Soviet Union, yeah. I feel like you would have a unique perspective on this. And in kind of prepping for this interview, what I noticed is a bunch of people were criticizing you specifically. They're making, I'm sure you know this, that, she grew up in the Ukraine. How is she going to vote against funding for Ukraine? Why? What went into your decision making to say, no, I actually don't think this is appropriate to give $61 billion?
Listen, it was kind of interesting for me. It's kind of almost like offensive in some way. As an American congresswoman, that represent Americans, I should actually not hold the government of a foreign country that I left 24 years ago accountable to the American people, to people I represent, to my children, to your children. I mean, that is almost unreasonable and really un-American to think that way. I understand. I'm proud of my Ukrainian heritage. I understand the challenges. I understand what's happening there. But I'm telling you, our foreign policy has been so bad, and slush fund and blank checks are not good for American people. We can't afford it. They're bad for Ukrainian people or everyone else around the world. Any conflicts like that have to have strategy and not growing our military-industrial complex, but actually looking how we're going to deal that we deter very aggressive countries like China, Iran, and Russia. And we are not doing that. But we also have to protect our own country. If we weaken us domestically and not protect us internally, and we are not doing it right now, and open the borders, I mean, destroying country with crushing debt and inflation, there is no hope for anyone else. We can destroy our country internally. That is one of the dangers. So we had to do that. And unfortunately, that was the only leverage that Republicans had. And the only hill I asked them to take this, I gave up I tried to push that issue, gave up this Congress. It's almost impossible right now, move the Senate. Okay, let's pick one hill to die on and take it, border security. Let's deliver at least on that. We failed on spending with omnibus, we fell on FISA, and we fell on border security. So what are we fighting for then? What can I tell the American people that Republican being in the majority in the House? I understand we cannot get everything, divided House. What have we delivered differently? That we can say we done something for the people, and people will get frustrated with us. So I was very upset that we didn't do that, and I was very upset we again did slush fund and blank checks, and I said I am not supporting that. I actually 2 years ago said I'm done with that. I'm not going to be supporting. And I don't think it's kind of interesting that all of the media said, worry about how I vote, but it's really almost like seriously un-American for me, but it's okay. I'm willing to pick some hills and go under attack.
Yeah, so there were actually, quite surprisingly, there were quite a few Republicans that voted yes for this Ukraine aid. And I was kind of surprised at President Trump's response to Mike Johnson. He was very sympathetic to Mike Johnson's position on the Ukraine funding. Do you think there's any strategy in this for if Trump were to be reelected that he could use? Do you think he potentially wants to see Ukraine at an advantageous position so when he's there, he can negotiate a peace settlement? Because frankly, from my perspective, I don't see any other end to this conflict that's not a negotiated settlement.
Well, listen, as I said, and what the agreement was, why I didn't support was, I said, I'm fine if we do some border security, maybe not the full HR2, and do some lethal aids that Ukraine can hold the ground. So Russia is not going to frozen move because we're going to have a huge problem, okay? And then move it, okay? But not given this big slush fund, and people don't even realize, part of it we give blank checks. They don't even necessarily go to Ukraine. We just give a blank check that Biden can spend on whatever he wants. We don't have any restriction. People don't even understand. So they do all of this cover up under Ukrainian aid. I mean, I'll give you an example. In one of the packages, $1 billion were given to Houthis in Yemen, that's shooting in our ships right now. They took them from a terrorist list and give them $1 billion. It's all associated cause. Everyone is associated. So Ukraine became a slush fund, for Biden to do whatever he wants. And some of this stuff, most of this stuff, all of this stuff is just dumb. He has the dumbest foreign policy I've ever seen in my life. I mean, honestly, I don't understand. He thinks giving terrorists $1 billion, they're going to be nice to us and say, oh, we're going to treat you very well. Guys, thank you so much. We're so appreciative. I mean, are we idiots or what? I mean, almost embarrassing what we're doing with foreign policy. So why we're not tightening the things? Why we're not doing that? And I don't think some of my colleagues, including Mike Johnson, really understand deep enough. And unfortunately, Congress is not spending enough time to understand what is happening with money and not asking the other branch what is going on. Over 70% of our spending is unauthorized. We're not authorized and keep giving blank checks. So we are not doing our job as Congress and not spending time to do it. And this is really subrogation of, it's truly, we're betraying the American people as Congress, not doing our job.
So the last thing I wanted to touch on this specific bill was you did have the no vote on the Ukraine line item, but when it came to Israel and Indo-Pacific funding, which ostensibly is for Taiwan, you had yes votes on those. Mm-hmm. Why did you vote yes on those two, but not on Ukraine?
Well, listen, and we had a discussion, and Ukraine has been, and it's a different situation. I think with other one, we also need to do, I didn't like some of the parts of that other bills too, but I understand what the situation right now in the Middle East, and we cannot abandon our allies in the Middle East. I'm understanding what, China is doing and what can happen in Taiwan. It's a very dangerous situation, even though we need to do way better there too. And some of the things what's happened because, Mike Johnson made deals with Democrats, not necessarily I would vote for these packages, but I decided I can live with that. But Ukraine has been a very complicated and situation that is actually, this war is happening since 2014.
Right.
It was mishandled by actually Biden-Obama administration. Trump was the first one who gave lethal aid to Ukraine, put pressure on Europeans not to be dependent on Russian gas and try to, increase to 2%.
And they laughed at him.
So he was the one who was the toughest actually on Russia in actions, not like in grandiose statements. And Putin doesn't care about grandiose statements. He cares about actions.
Right.
But this is a situation that I've been for 2 years. I've been fighting with Republicans. I've been fighting with Biden. I said, we cannot have this never-ending wars. It costs us money, it costs lives, and they end not very well. Let's look at Afghanistan. $2 trillion spent. What's happened there? It's disaster. It was embarrassment. Our withdrawal was just the most embarrassing thing, abandoning the lies. So let's do it smarter. We have to deal it smarter. And we do not deal with that strategy. And we're again doing exactly the same thing. And it's going to cause us headaches, and it's going to have a big problem, and we're dealing with very, very shady governments over there, okay? So we shouldn't give them cash, and if they need to borrow, they should borrow from Europeans. I understand the challenges, and I understand the importance not to let Putin to continue advancing what he's doing and actually causing problems in Africa and Middle East and, in cahoots with China and Iran. I understand that, but that is not a strategy. I'll tell you one more thing. When we defeated Soviet Union, we didn't defeat it with weapons.
Right.
We defeated Soviet Union with energy policies and limiting access to financial markets. Russia is doing just great, selling oil and making a lot of blood money. And we are destroying energy, domestic energy. Our Alaska pipeline at half capacity. Our natural gas companies cannot get permits. Isn't it dumb? I mean, who is benefiting from that? Iran, Russia, and China. What about access to financial markets? All Chinese stock, Russian stock, all traded here. Everyone is making money. No one is enforcing the sanctions. So are we serious or not? I mean, that's what the problem is. And that's why I disagree what's happening right now. We are not taking that war seriously. And it is not in our national interest to continue this never-ending war. Slush funds, they end very bad. And I was very clear 2 years ago when the war started. And I have a very clear positions, and unfortunately, a lot of my Republicans don't listen. More Republicans paying attention. Unfortunately, Democrats are totally lost cause. Drinking the Kool-Aid, I hate to tell, that party is like a lost cause, okay? This is like a socialist at best, but my party has been also weak and corrupt and really not hypocritical, truly hypocritical.
Yeah, and one of the things you touched on there is obviously how Biden's policies have sort of pushed Russia into Beijing's arms and the energy trade. And obviously another thing for Americans that has China in the news is TikTok, right?
Yeah.
That was also part of this package that went through. And just to give full clarity here, I like to consider myself a China watcher. I spend a lot of time in Asia, so I'm very much for the bill. But I've noticed a lot of the conversation, and I know you voted yes on this as well.
Yeah.
You see Shou Chu, the CEO of TikTok, coming out running defense. You see lobbyists. They say, okay, we're going to take this to the courts, whatever. I'm not really concerned about them. But what I am concerned about is I was watching this YouTuber named Charlie White, 15 million subscribers, huge on Twitch, generally libertarian-minded in a lot of ways. He comes out and he says, I do not want the government deciding what content I can and cannot consume, so I'm not for what happened with TikTok. How would you convince someone like him and his audience of millions of young Americans that the TikTok ban is actually a good thing for America?
Listen, I'll tell you something. So there are two issues there. First of all, Congress has to deal with big tech in general, and it's not dealing with big tech, it's dealing with data privacy. As we say, we have to protect your rights, right? Rights of Americans. Well, privacy and data, it's also a right. It's a new type of property. And we have to define that right in the code. What do you own? What can you have to have, have an explicit, agreement to share, and what is the data is, and what a big tech can use. Because what's generally the problem is becoming right now, and it's a huge problem. Enormous amount of data is collected on all of us. I mean, they know more than you probably and me know about ourselves. We have artificial intelligence can manipulate the data and really target us with very smart now ads and everything else, right? And it's not like even TV, you look Fox News, CNN, you know what propaganda they're going to say. Unless you go to Google, search on page 15, you might not even get other information, right? So we have that, and plus quantum computers, you have enormous amount to analyze and micro-target people, and then you have a very ill-educated electorate. People can be easily persuaded and brainwashed, and so you have now an ability to control opinions and countries. And the danger becoming when you have a foreign country like China has enormous amount of data on Americans, that is actually a national security risk. So I think we have to deal with our domestic companies too. I'm not just saying we only need, I think TikTok is hopeful it's number one issue that we start dealing with them and maybe bring awareness, but it's the same. Googles and Facebooks of this world, they doing the same stuff. And they also can be selling the data, and they are selling to FBI and DOJ, they can be selling to China. So there's actually danger too. So I hope that will bring some kind of pressure on us to Congress and start thinking about it. Are we protecting really privacy and rights of Americans? Or we're selling Americans out to big tech and big monopolies, and in this case in China. So I think that is not enough to do that, but I think it's a challenge right now where we are with China and what they're trying to do to destabilize country. So we have to really think about it from national security perspective and bring more transparency. And the same, even Chinese stock here, a lot of this traded, our pension fund invested in Chinese company. And I'm a free enterprise person, okay? I just said, I actually have a bill, and I said, if you want to invest in communist China, that's fine. That's, you'll take a risk, we might have been serious crisis over there, but that's your money. The problem I have, all of these pension funds, people don't realize
where
their passive investment. They don't realize that their money helping Chinese military. I got a problem with that. So I want to look at transparency. So I think we have to bring more transparency and data protection. And I think that is one step, but I agree, it's not a sufficient step. And I know that a lot of people on big tech don't like it, but we need to come to consensus because we don't want to kill innovation, and we want to have smaller entities and innovators to be able to use data because it can bring so many opportunities and innovation in so many areas, but also not at the expense of turning Americans into puppets and all us being controlled by a big machine of power. That is unacceptable. We cannot sacrifice our freedoms for some kind of progress and innovation, so we need to strike the right balance. And I don't think Congress has been taking this issue seriously. We had a lot of actually drama last Congress and discussion, but I hope maybe that will bring a serious conversation. And some other big tech companies think maybe they will be next on the table, or in the menu, so maybe they should sit down and have a conversation.
Well, that's the other kind of fear that I've seen for the more libertarian-minded that are saying, well, okay, look, if the government can do this to TikTok, if they can do this to ByteDance, why couldn't they just come into X or to Rumble or whoever and make them wipe them out too? Is that a fair?
It's a fair statement, but what I would say them back, why do they try to kill any conversation with big money to have discussion how we can strike the right balance? Maybe they will come to the table and start having discussion. I tried to have a discussion with them last Congress. I said, listen, I'm a free enterprise person. I want to strike the right balance. I understand that what Congress does, if we don't do this discussion, then things get bad, and they're we're going to cut, and we're going to take you out, we're going to split you. We do really harsh things that usually are not good. Okay, but you're going to wait long enough, people are going to get mad, and my colleagues are going to say, what are we going to do? We're going to just, split you up and do this and this. It's not in your interest. But unfortunately, a lot of these CEOs, I think they are not right now, not really thinking long-term about their companies because there are perverse incentives not to think. But they should get to the table and say, how can we make sure? Plus, I said, listen, you have so much already money and data. You're already so rich. You shouldn't be worried about competition. You don't worry. You're going to survive any competition. But we have so many now oligopolies and so many markets so hungry for power, and they spend so much money lobbying against the little guy in Congress that everyone is afraid to stand up. But I think maybe that's a good kind of message to them. Maybe we'll have a conversation. And I told them, I'm on Judiciary Committee. I said, I told them, I'm willing to have a conversation if you want willing to have a productive conversation, or you might not like what you're going to see next.
Okay, well, maybe some of these big tech companies will take note then and kind of force their feet to the fire a little bit. The last thing, I didn't really plan on asking you about this, but it's, of course, the news of the day. And so I would like to pick your brain. Campuses are crazy right now. From Columbia to USC to the University of Texas at Austin, they are being essentially occupied by what seems to be at the least, Hamas sympathizing crowd, pro-Palestine at the very least. What's going on? Who is organizing this, and what should governors or the federal government do about this uprising that we're having right now?
Well, listen, if you not understand what we're doing to our children, we're promoting Marxist agenda that leads to violence and oppression, and that's what it goes through, right? You do division, either do race warfare or class warfare or religious. That is Karl Marx 101, and we've been brainwashing our young children into Marxist agenda. I was shocked when I was teaching at IU a little bit. I would come some students and tell me they're Marxists. I'm like, are you kidding me? You don't understand how many people were killed by this. I mean, that was very powerful ideology. I mean, you should understand what it is about. And I would start talking to a lot of students in my classes. They don't even understand what it is, Marxism. But unfortunately, our children be weakened so much by lack of good education, lack of good family, lack of good religious beliefs, lack of the Second Amendment rights. They've been weakened so much, and now they have so many mental health issues, all of these problems, and then on top of it, they try to intimidate and coerce them. And unfortunately, that is really, we're turning our young people into submission. And we have a lot of very clever, ideologically driven academia that understand if they control the youth and young people, they will control the future of the country. And now in the campuses, if you are going to express different opinion, unbelievable. Actually, Jewish students are intimidated and afraid to express their opinion to the point, a lot of them, I had some interns, in my class, in my office, and they said, we're truly afraid for our life because they are going to be punished. Conservatives are afraid to that. This is a tyranny of opinion that I didn't experience even, on my post-Soviet Union times on campuses. I mean, we had some professors, you could get a bad grade if they're on their own side, you could, we had that, but we never had actually afraid for your life to be able to do that. That's been during the time, maybe KGB in, in 70s, but it didn't exist even in the 90s. So now it exists on American campuses, but it's a true Marxist agenda. And now we're actually trying to control young people, and they've been so brainwashed because they're ill-educated about the fundamentals and easy to brainwash. And we have a very aggressive countries and money, and people are gender driven now, spending money to control them. And I think this is very dangerous because it can lead to violence, and that's how they undermine internal structure. Marxists do it through violence. You see how they did revolutions and everything, and that creates a lot of instability. And on top of it, with all of the data collections that they have and ability to influence young people, including through TikTok, you can have China promoting indirectly communism and sending all these messages to destabilize America internally without even entering the country. Through fentanyl and social media, they can destabilize and take down our republic. That is a huge danger.
And to me, it seems like it's very hard for this to be an organic movement as it spread across the country like that. Is there any indication or any information that you or other leaders in Washington have about who is organizing this or who's funding this specifically?
Well, listen, you can see that the most organized, under Obama and all of people who work for him, they become the movements actually on the left became very well organized. They use a community organizing, they use these NGOs, they spend a lot of money on that, and it's a very they're brilliant how they reorganize the whole movement, and they have an ability to influence a lot of people. If you think about it, what they're doing with election processes and redistricting and how many states they get sued. I mean, the most gerrymandered state is state of Illinois, and they come and no one is suing them for gerrymandering their district, but they will come at every item. They understand what are the fundamentals of building the free society and how to undermine them in a clever way. And unfortunately, they accumulated so much data. So these people, listen, when I was state senator in the state of Indiana, I was surprised in the Republican supermajority how many bills that were really communist agenda oriented, I've tried to an amendment I tried to kill. Because I couldn't believe in Indiana, super much. I spent more time killing bills and passing. It took so much time, and I was like, "This is brilliant." So it couldn't be not organized because the same agenda I see there, I see here. I mean, the other side is brilliant, and we've been really stupid and reluctant and underestimate. Republicans are very good on defense, fighting China on Fox News. But we've been terrible on offense. And the other side, I have to tell, they're very well organized. They're organized with money. I mean, they're organized with agenda, and they really have oppression of anyone on their side too who is not willing to comply. So like the whole Democrat Party now turned into a machine that they will destroy you. And so it's a dictatorship, complete dictatorship on the other side. And the other side is hypocritical and all over the place, and we're losing to them. And we're truly losing this republic.
Well, that's a bright picture, I suppose, but at least it seems we have some good people still out there looking out for us, so we do appreciate that.
Well, listen, I look at that, our republic went through tougher times. This is not the toughest time. It's not the first time, not the last time. But this is going to be a test to our generation. And each of us is going to look and say, you know what? It's challenging, but looking back, we're either going to say, well, this is where generation that failed, or we're going to look, you know what? We're going to figure it out. And I think we have a lot of smart people on the ground. It's not people in Washington, D.C. We gave them too much power. We have enormous opportunity for innovation, creativity. Every industry, whether it's healthcare and education, if we would have all of the innovation that happened everywhere else, it would bring to this industry. We can have such a bright future. We can reform so much and empower so many people in our country. We just have to be smarter and tougher and be able to force politicians to understand that they are not in charge of our lives. They protect rights and stay the hell out of our way. And we as a people need to do a better job to understand we still as Americans have a power. I would never be in the United States Congress if it wouldn't be for the power of people. Right. It's not because someone they say someone who came, from, Ukraine 24 years ago with one suitcase and, with nothing, barely could speak English. And I'm now in United States Congress, even though it's a shit show right now, but it's okay. We'll make it better. But truly, that is still, so American dream is still alive. That's no opportunities would be in any other country, but it's getting harder and harder. So we as a people have to step up. And I think it's, Hayek was said that, that all of the centralization power and communism and socialism is inevitable. Friedman said, well, when people wake up and start doing reverse some of these trends, they can do it. So I hope people are going to wake up, and this election will show, but I hope people will wake up this election, because we cannot let our great republic fail, and I truly believe we will not, and we will win.
Congresswoman Spartz, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.